Welcome to another edition of Through the Fire in the SBN Small Business Network podcast. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we're joined with husband, father, Christian, youth pastor, and podcaster, Adam Swedenberg. Man, that's a whole mouthful of stuff you just gave me there to introduce you, Adam. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing so good. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I look forward to the episode today.
Hey, my pleasure. So, explain to us, who is Adam Swedenberg?
Oh, man, that is a great question. And, there used to be a me that was not a me and used to think I should have been in jail or in prison. But thankfully, through God's grace, I am now a children's and youth pastor, podcast host, and got a 7-month-old and a wife. And it's just amazing. God's grace is great. So to answer your question, I would say that the Adam is just enjoying life and spreading the gospel in every way I can.
Yeah, that's amazing testimony right there. I could just already tell, you're inspired by God's grace.
Oh, for sure. Most definitely. I can share my testimony with y'all if you would like.
Yeah, just give a little background on what drew you closer to God.
For sure. So I grew up in a very tough area, and also a tough home, and just things were miserable, and went through being fostered and adopted, and during the foster stages, I had a lot going on. Me and my siblings were now living under 3 different roofs, and just a lot going on. A lot of anger, was trying to fill my life with a bunch of different things to make me happy, such as cigarettes at a young age, weed at a young age, alcohol at a young age. Eventually joined gangs. Was doing everything to try to find happiness in my life, and I started realizing that the friends that I was hanging out with were either going to jail or dying, and I was like, I don't want to end up like that. And so, thankfully, our foster dad, that later became our adoptive dad, he was always a children's and youth pastor his whole life. And so, I would always get dragged to church. And I say dragged because when I was young, I didn't care about God and didn't think he was real, hated him because of all the things I had and my siblings had been through. And so, but I noticed one thing that stood out to me about church folk, and it was kind of crazy. I was like, man, these church folk are kind of crazy. And it was the fact that on one Sunday, they could lose a job or a loved one or a dog or whatever, a car, whatever it was, and then the next Sunday they could come back happy again. And I was like, yo, you just lost something, and now you're back a week later and you're happy again? Like, I don't understand. And so I started questioning my dad, started paying more attention at church. And that's when I really realized that I needed to make a change in my life. Because what I was chasing wasn't actually causing me happiness. Most of the time it was causing me worse problems and worse pain. And so then I realized, like John 3:16, for God so loved me that he gave his one and begotten son, that whoever believes in him shall be saved and have the gift of eternal life. And then I realized, like Romans 5:8 states, that while I'm a sinner, Christ died for me. And I was like, why does this guy that I don't even know and at this point in my life hate, why is the Bible telling me that he loves me and died for me? And so that led me to asking more questions, getting more involved, and becoming more curious of who this God person was. And when I finally figured it all out, I gave my life to God. And man, it's just been amazing just being the passenger of that car and letting Jesus take the wheel and where he wants to take it. And that's what led me to Jesus Christ.
Man, that's an amazing story and testament to God's grace right there to save you at your lowest points.
Oh, for sure. It taught me that Jesus loves everyone, that Jesus cares for everyone, And not only that, but that your past doesn't define who you are or what your future can be.
I love it. Beautifully stated right there. So, you were talking about like a lot of the people you were around. I mean, how much did you realize that, and how hard was it for you to break away from some of that crowd?
It was very challenging, very challenging. Even after I gave my life to God, I still, had struggle with some of the things that I was doing in my life. And to say it was a simple overnight change would be just a lie. Sometimes us church people, including myself, sometimes love to make it to where when you give your life to God, it sounds like a miraculous overnight change. And, you know, while I wish that was true, and maybe for some of you it is, for me, it wasn't the case. And so I just kept having to struggle, kept having to, figure things out, and eventually I finally gave everything up when I started to realize that those that I wanted to hang out with, when I no longer wanted to do the stuff we used to do but just hang out for the simple fact of hanging out, they would always seem to make an excuse for why they couldn't hang out with me. And I started realizing, they only wanted this relationship, they only wanted to hang out with me because I was only into the bad stuff. They didn't really honestly care about Adam. They just cared about the stuff that we were doing.
Yeah. So I have a similar story with a lot of that and similar background. So I completely understand. And it's definitely not overnight success.
Exactly. I wish it was though. That would be great.
Yeah, but I think we'd have missed the lesson that went involved with it too.
Oh, for sure. Yes, the lessons are so important. And like Jeremiah 29 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And it's through the struggle that I really was down on my knees asking, okay, God, if I'm going to give my life to you, then what am I supposed to do now? And that verse hits me, and it still reminds me that, hey, I'm not in control, that God is. And I totally agree with you. If we didn't have trials and struggles and life was just easy all the time, I think there would be a lot of things for a lot of people that we would miss out on learning.
Yeah, well said. So how hard was it for you to give up control? Because that was one of the hardest things I had to do was learn, hey, I'm not in control of my life. You take the wheel.
Oh, for sure. It was definitely, definitely hard. I don't remember what age I finally was when I was like, here I am, Lord, I'm giving everything up to you. Uh, I would say it was mid 20s. Honestly, if I had to be honest, I was saved in around when I was age 17, and it was probably mid 20s when I finally was like, okay, Lord, I'm giving you everything. It's all yours, because even after I was gave my life to God, because of the things that I had gone through as a child and things that I used to do as a teenager, and just the gangs and all the things, and I used to feel led that God was calling me into ministry. And I used to say, okay, you want me to go into ministry, the guy that used to do this, the guy that used to do this? Nah, I'm good. I don't think I deserve that. I think you're nope, not doing that. And so, for a long, long time I chased the fire world, and then I fell in love through firefighting, fell in love with the EMS side of things, and chased what I thought would be happiness into a nursing degree. And it's a funny story, so I like to share it. I was sitting in nursing school and was listening to the professor speak, and something hit me, and I mean it hit me like a lightning bolt. And just all of a sudden I found myself packing up my bag as quietly as I could, walking out of the room as quietly as I could without disturbing everyone else. And I was unenrolling, dropping out of nursing school, and then wanted to enroll into Liberty University for a bachelor's in next gen ministry. And I realized that at the time I did everything so out of order, because then after I had already dropped out of nursing school and walked out, I realized I had a full ride scholarship, and I was like, wait a second, I need to call my full ride scholarship and still see if they're going to give me this scholarship or not. Now that I've already walked out, and then they thankfully did, and I was enrolling into Liberty, and then after I enrolled in Liberty, talked to the scholarship people and everything, I was like, oh wait, I have a fiance and she has no clue what just happened. So, so it's a crazy story, but I say that to say that for a long time I ran from it. I ran from God's calling. I ran from God's control, and finally I found myself in a place where it just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I changed everything for God.
Wow. Amen. Amen. So, what would you say is the biggest problem you face, the biggest challenge that dealing with kids in youth ministry?
I guess nowadays the hardest challenge of children's and youth ministry is that youth come from a generation of not being church, and it's no offense to the parents or anything like that, but we're about two generations in, and the reason is because I remember my grandparents, they would always drag us to church, if even if my dad was sick or whatever. But it was because one of them used to be able to not work. Like my granddad would work and my grandmother didn't have to work, kind of thing. But for the last two generations, we've lived in tough times where both parents have to work hard jobs. And because of that, they either both may be working on Sundays, or Sunday may be their only off day. And so they like to sleep in. And so, anyway, we now are in a generation where youth aren't used to going to church. And so you have to find creative ways to be able to get them into church and make church fun, but also at the same time teaching them the Bible. And so that's the hardest part. How do you get somebody that's used to not going to church, not only them, but like one or two generations in their family? How do you get them to be able to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to go try out your church?
Yeah. So, what are some of the ways you get them to keep it fun for them?
Yeah, so we do a lesson and a game every Wednesday night. I also give them. We also feed our children and youth every Wednesday night with no cost to the children and youth. A meal is provided, and then we do a lesson, and then I always tie the lesson into a game. But I think it goes so much deeper than just also making it fun. One thing I've always strived to do is make my ministry look like the ministry of Jesus, because we are called to be the image of God. And so, in doing that, I realized that when Jesus was on earth and was doing ministry, he wasn't just asking people to come to church. He wasn't just preaching to the people that came to church. Now, he was out there going to weddings. He was out there going to events. He was out there going to tax collectors' houses. He was out there preaching in the streets. And so what I've done is I go to the local high school, and I've started a Christian club at the local high school that meets every Thursday morning before school. And I do devotions with the football team on the football field. I do devotions with the soccer team in the locker room. I randomly show up to students' band practices. I randomly show up to students' baseball games or football games. Why? Because I'm showing them, hey, y'all coming to church is important, but it's a two-way street. I care equally as much as y'all, and my way of showing it is that I'm showing up to y'all's events as well.
That's awesome. So, what's the most rewarding part about working with all the youth?
I think the most rewarding thing about working with the children and youth is just being able to teach them about God, because it honestly is for a lot of them the first time they're hearing about God. And so you see a child or you see a youth come in, and you just start pouring into their life, pouring loves, pouring the Bible, and you start to watch them change who they are, their actions, the way they talk, the way they treat people. It's just amazing. And once they start changing that, eventually sometimes I get to encounter them giving their life to God. And for example, this last December, we had 4 of our youth get baptized. And it's just an amazing thing to watch them come in not knowing much and leading them to baptism. I would definitely say that's the most rewarding, is just being able to watch and help grow the faith in these young people.
That's awesome. I mean, you're definitely doing God's work. So, with everything you have going on, how did you get into podcasting?
Oh, for sure. Great question. So I was sitting in my office because I'm required a certain amount of hours to be in my office here at the church. And so I was sitting in the office, and I had kind of already finished the work for the day and still had like an hour and a half left of work time. And I was like, what could I do while I'm sitting in the office to be able to get my voice out and to tell people about God? There's got to be something. And so I was sitting there, and I was thinking TikTok, I was thinking Facebook Reels. I was just sitting there, and something dawned on me, and I was like, you know what? I could do a podcast, and I could do the topic of each podcast episode would be just revised, shortened lessons of what I taught the youth on Wednesday nights. And that way, also, not only that, but it would give a parent, if they're wanting to know what's going on, a way to listen and hear what's going on in the youth group. Or if a youth misses a Wednesday night for football or band or whatever, it gives them a way to jump on and hear a short revised version of what they missed that Wednesday night. And so while that's what got me into podcasting, and I totally felt God leading me into podcasting, I never saw until recently where God actually wanted my podcast to be, because that's what Adam thought the podcast was about. Adam knew that God was calling him into podcasting, but Adam didn't realize what God was going to do through podcasting. And so I say that because now I do 3 episodes a week. 2 episodes are with a guest, and then I do a solo episode each Wednesday, and would have never imagined doing all of that or being in the spot that I am now with
Isn't it funny how God just changes things up on you midway through?
it. Yeah. God's like, I want you to go in for this, and then once you like take the bite, it's like, okay, I was getting you to take the bite. Now I'm gonna reveal to you what I really want you to do through
Yeah.
this.
So how many podcasts do you have?
I have one. I used to do 2, but I have one now.
Okay. Because I saw before that you were talking about maybe starting a third one even.
Yeah. Nope. Nope. I had 2, and then this one was really, really going good. Started picking up momentum, started picking up guests, and I was like, you know what? I don't have the time to equally throw out great content into both. And so I took a long time talking with God and asking God, what do you want me to do? And that's where God met me and said, I want you to do this one podcast, Uncharted Navigating Faith and Life, and have other people come on also giving advice from their perspectives on how to live out faith in just everyday life.
That's amazing. Is it mostly designed to have other like Christians come on and just explain give their testimony and
For sure, yeah. So now that we've transitioned from how I originally started, now it's a podcast about Christian faith, and the guests are Christians, and then we talk about who the guest is, what the guest has going on, and how to connect with each guest, if it's an author or a singer or another podcaster, whoever it is. And then we transition by always ask each guest a topic, a question, and it's, what topic would you like to talk about with our listeners on just practical advice to live out their faith? And it's always so great hearing other perspectives, because other people come from other parts of the world, other people come from other stories, and it's just so great getting their advice on how they live out their faith in everyday life and their encouragement as well on that.
awesome. So, what is the biggest challenge you face podcasting?
The most challenging thing I would say with podcast is if you're gonna do guesting, it's challenging sometimes because either your life gets busy or you unexpectedly go into the hospital. I unexpectedly went into the hospital the first part of last week, or other people have things happen where they go in the hospital, or just life happens. You never know what life's gonna happen, and so life happens. And since you're working with two people, the guest and the host, sometimes you can have a podcast episode scheduled where you're going to record like a month ahead, but then something happens, and so then you're scrambling trying to either figure out if you're just going to not do that, or if you're going to try to find a guest that can fill that time spot that you had, and or whatever. So that's the most challenging, is just scheduling, and then just keeping it scheduled for whatever reasons.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I've had to make some small changes to my schedule just to fit people in. So, what's your favorite thing about podcasting?
The The favorite thing about podcasting is goes hand in hand with the guest. Just being able to get different guests on, or being on different podcasts such as this one we're doing right now, and just getting to talk to our listeners, and just being able to meet other people such as you, and just different guests, and getting to know others. And man, it has been awesome getting to know some of the people that I've been on their podcasts, or they've been on mine, and just I've made some friendships through guests that I've met, and it's just amazing.
So, I think that's probably my favorite part is hearing other people's stories, like the stories that you hear. Like everybody's been through something.
For sure, everybody has, everybody, whether it's small, big, or large, whatever. Everybody has a story, and everybody has obstacles at some point in their life that they have to figure out how to overcome.
Right. So, how important has personal development been for you along this journey?
Personal development is very important, and also, not only that, but taking personal time because, like you mentioned in my bio, I'm a EMT, a dad, I got a family, do the podcast, children and youth pastor. So I would say that whatever you're doing, whether it's one thing or six different things, take time to take personal time, and take time to spend with the Lord, and just keep your knowledge of the Bible, stay in the Bible, and don't forget who you are. Like we talked about who I am professionally at the very beginning, but also there's an Adam outside of that. So no matter what you have going on, don't forget who you are also, besides just all your professional stuff going on.
Great advice. So, what are some of your short term and long term goals?
Yeah, so my short term goals are, just keep living life filled with Jesus Christ, keep sharing the gospel with everyone, and finding ways to do that. Um, just raise my son the best of I can, and keep pouring into his life. Those are some of my short term easy goals. And then my long term goals, I would love to have the podcast going great, um, and getting followers and listeners. And I'm working on a book. That's a long term goal. Hopefully short term, but I feel like it's going to be a long term goal. I'm working on a book about my life, in depth of my testimony, and in depth of where I was and what all I've gone through, and who I am today. And then another long term goal of mine would be that I would be, having a youth group that is 50 students. I love growing the youth group, and I always strive to get every new youth or child that we can. So that'd be a long term goal. Also, is just keep growing the youth, and one day maybe I'll be leading a big youth group.
Currently, how many kids do you have in your youth group?
Yeah, that's a great question. In our children's, we average 10 children every Wednesday night. We average about 15 children on Sundays. And it's I don't say this to brag. I'm just saying it to answer your question. But when I started, we had like 3 children on Wednesday night, and so now we have 10. And then for our youth, we have any given night now here lately, we've had anywhere between 23 to 25 youth. And again, just I praise God because when I started here at this church, we had 4 youth, and now we've grown to 23 to 25 on Wednesday nights. And then on Sunday mornings, we usually average about 8 youth. Definitely have larger numbers for youth on Wednesday nights, but it's been amazing.
That's awesome. So you can see steady progress then in what you guys are doing then.
Oh, most definitely, yes. Thanks to God. I don't like to take the credit. All credit goes to God.
Yeah. So how far are you out on your book?
So I'm just starting it. I've written about half of it, still writing more of it, and then I get to start all the fun publisher stuff and going through all that. So, you know, just at the baby stages.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to start somewhere, I guess, right?
That's right.
What advice would you give to someone wanting to start a podcast?
Uh, my advice to anybody wanting to start a podcast is my same advice that I would tell anybody, no matter what it is don't give up. You may think, oh, that's not for me, or oh, I don't know those skills, or uh, all right, never mind, I'm not going to do that. Or you may hear the world telling you that you're not good enough or that you won't be good enough, and overcome those. Overcome the lies about yourself, overcome your thoughts about not doing it, overcome nobody's going to listen to me, or I won't be important, or I'm not as good as the next person. Just overcome all that and just do it. When I started my podcast, I didn't have anything. I was speaking straight into my laptop, and it wasn't the best audio, but I did it, and then I am where I am today. So be like Nike and just do it.
How many episodes do you have currently?
I currently have, off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I would say at least somewhere between the 20 to 25 mark.
That's not bad. So you said you're doing what, 3 a week now?
I am. Yep.
Nice. So this is a question I ask everybody who comes on here. So what is one book you would recommend for personal development or mindset?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Um, you know, I don't read very many books, but the books that I do normally read is youth ministry related. And so if you are in youth ministry or you're wanting to know how to help the uh, youth learn more about God, a great book would be My First 3 Years in Youth Ministry by Doug Fields.
Awesome. How can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I am on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Spotify, all the most of all the major apps of podcast streaming, and then I am also on YouTube, and I am also on Rumble. I'm on social media. Most of all my social medias are Adam Swedenberg. My Instagram is c.y. Pastor Adam. And then my podcast again is Uncharted Navigating Faith and Life.
Thank you. That's awesome. Adam, I want to thank you for gracing us with your time here today and telling us your amazing testimony. I mean, you can definitely tell God's done some amazing things in your life.
Thank you so much. He definitely has. And, he can, not only in my life, but he can do it in yours. So don't let your past define who you are.
Great advice right there. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have today. Remember, to get what you want, you got to go through the fire.